Hello, my name is Julie and today I'm going to be talking about the 12 books that I read in April. Almost said March there. The year is flying by. I seriously cannot believe I'm doing another wrap up. I have very little time today, so I'm just gonna do as fast as I can, give you all the books. I read 12 books, like I said, for a total of 3,941 pages. This is actually the first time this year I have not crossed the 4,000 page mark, despite me tying my most amount of books for a month this year. I had an average rating of 3.92, and I have one book that I am giving a 5-star right now, but honestly, there are 2 books that I'm considering pushing up, so pretty good track record this month. I read 6 books from my shelf, added 0 to my shelf, so we are at -9 for the year. That is fantastic, especially because my birthday is coming up, and so I'm probably gonna get a lot of books. Oops. From my star ratings, I had 5 3-stars, 6 4-stars, and 1 5-star. Then when we look at my pie charts, I have an equal amount of general fiction, fantasy, and mystery thriller horror, with some romance and classics thrown in. I read a third audiobooks as usual, and I sprinkled in 1 ebook. 3/4 of the books that I read were standalones, but I read 1 first book in a series, 1 sequel, and 1 conclusion. We love to see it. And then for author familiarity, I had 7 authors that were new to me, 4 authors that I've read before, and 1 author that I read before that I have already read this year, so my first repeat author of the year, which I don't do very often. So let's just get straight into the books. The first book that I read this month was The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This is a high fantasy book that is the first one in a series in which our main character Helena is a clerk of someone who is a emperor's justice. So they are someone who goes around the empire and they are checking that people are doing the law. And so they are partially like someone who is carrying out the law, they're partially a lawyer, they're sometimes a detective, and they also carry a sword, so in very dire times, they're sometimes an executioner. Our main character, Helena, is an old woman who is telling the story of when she was a teenager and reflecting on this turning point in the empire. So Von Volt's whole entourage has gone to this small town where a rich woman was killed and they are investigating her murder. And all the while they are finding out that there seems to be seeds of something brewing darker underneath the surface. I have been telling you for all of 2024 that I had struggled to find first books and fantasy series that were great, and then all 3 fantasy series that I've started this year have been absolute bangers, and I'm telling you this is one of them. If you like the North in Game of Thrones and you like mystery in your fantasy, I think this first book will be fantastic for you. I love the cold frozen setting. It really felt like it jumped off the page and also contributed to these ideas of being in a very isolated area away from the moving and shaking in the empire. I really liked our main character. I liked the frame narrative of her being like, I didn't know that was going to be relevant later. I thought that this being about an investigation was really intriguing. It turns out that the author is actually a lawyer himself, so there's like a courtroom scene, and there's also like some talk about actual investigative stuff, like as much as they can in a fantasy world. I think this book is building to something fantastic because we're starting to see these people who are trying to overthrow the empire. But like, we understand that the empire is not a perfect system. Like, obviously there's bad stuff with it. We are following people who are part of the empire who are trying to be better people and change it for the better. But there are people who are trying to take advantage of the bad things about the system to completely overthrow it for something that is more unfair. If that sounds really relevant to things happening in the real world right now, it's because it is extremely relevant to things that are happening in the world right now. I love a politically infused fantasy. I think one of the great things about the fantasy genre is when it makes you take things that happen in that book and apply it to the real world. And reading this book at this moment in time, it was really powerful to me. Right now, I'm settling on a 4.5, and I think that the sequels in the series could easily be 5s. Then I read 3 books for a vlog, so you can check that vlog out here if you want to get my full thoughts on these. I'll try to be short. And that vlog was me reading books that are considered to be similar to my favorite book of all time, Bunny by Mona Awad. The first book that I read for this was Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin and translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell. This is a horror novella that is about a woman who is in the hospital. She's barely conscious and she is having a conversation with a boy who is not her son. The boy is asking her to tell him what happened to her to make her get here. She is remembering the things as she is telling him. She knows something something bad is going to happen, but she doesn't remember what those bad things are and is just wanting to stop the bad things from happening. Also, this book is told entirely in the dialogue between these two people. This book does heavily have to do with parenting, as our main character is a mother and she is sort of trying to take care of her child as much as possible. And a lot of the horror is the fear and dread that parents feel when they are trying to protect their children from everything, but they know that eventually something has to slip through the cracks. And on top of that, there is also a larger scale horror thing that is going on here that is super relevant. I think it surprised me that that was what was going on, because I tried to go into this book not knowing anything. The form of the book, of this woman being in such a disoriented fever dream-like state, matches the type of horror it ends up being and what sort of the answer to the situation is. And it's this feeling of not knowing something until it's too late. And I just think that this book did such a good job giving that atmosphere and dread and not really being sure what's going on, because that is totally what I am looking for in a horror. And I also usually critique novellas for being too short, but I ended up thinking that this was the right length. So I am going to be giving this book a very strong 4-star, and this is going to be a horror book that I recommend to a lot of people. Then I read A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is a book about Dorothy, who was a food critic until she was arrested for murder and cannibalism. And we are reading the book that she has written in prison and has been published for the world to read, as she is kind of talking about her relationship with food. She's talking in these really lush descriptions about food, and she's also talking about her relationships with other people, as she has diagnosed herself as a psychopath, and how she gets into the whole eating people thing. It's a satire, it's also a horror, and it's like a slashery horror, which is not 100% the thing that I go for all the time. This book does exactly what it says on the tin. I don't think it goes any further. I felt so neutral towards this book the whole time I was reading it. I wasn't particularly laughing or feeling that horrified. Like, the descriptions are gross, don't get me wrong, but like the actual plot of it, I was kind of meh. I don't think this really did much. I'm giving this a flat 3. I don't think it did anything wrong. It just wasn't exciting. Then I read Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a short story collection. It has 8 stories in it that are all speculative, tinged with a bit of horror, but they are grounded in real life. And all of these stories have to do with women's bodies, how they are often taken advantage of, there's violence done against them, how people feel in their own bodies, how people often feel possession over women's bodies. And with most short story collections, I feel like there is one big winner story that I give big 5 stars, and then a couple stories I feel neutral about, and then a story I hate. And that did not happen with this book. This is like the first short story collection that I felt like the same way most of the way through. There was one story in this that I did not like, and all the other stories I basically gave a 4-star, maybe a 3.5. Off the top of my head, my favorites were probably The Husband Stitch, which is based on the story of the girl with the green ribbon. I also liked 8 Bites, which is about a woman who is having weight loss surgery, and Difficult at Parties, which is about a woman who has experienced assault and she is trying to feel comfortable in her body again, particularly when it comes to sex. And my least favorite was Especially Heinous, which is told in SVU synopses of episodes. So it takes like real titles of real episodes of SVU and then puts some sort of speculative synopsis or scene that she's written to go with that. I think the stuff in the first half of the book I was liking more than the back half of the book. I think I'm going to be giving this a 3.75. Very solid collection. Then for my book club 3 of clubs this quarter, we are reading books about books and writers, and this month we are reading Writers and Lovers by Lily King. Our main character is a writer who's been trying to write her first book for basically a decade, and she has been working as a waitress, and her mom has just died, and she has just gotten out of a relationship that she was very invested in. Basically, all of her friends have stopped trying to pursue the arts as a job, so she is at this pivotal point in her life, and at this point she meets 2 men that she is equally interested in, and they are sort of shaping her feelings at this time. I listened to this on audiobook, and I thought that the narration was great. I thought that the narrator really brought a lot of emotion to the text. The standout thing here was the prose for me. I thought it brought a lot to the story itself. I liked our main character. I think her feelings about her mom are so sweet, as she is just feeling like her mom is being carried everywhere with her. And I think that that story about grief will really resonate with people in the way that it is portrayed. And then I was engaged with the rest of it. I like the story of our main character character trying to push as hard as she can to keep up with writing. I think the romance went in a way that I didn't end up loving. I was kind of hoping for a different ending, or just like a different attitude toward the ending. And I think the way that it wrapped up felt a little bit more cliche and trite, but it was good. I think I would have liked to see more about her actually doing the writing. So I think I'm giving this a 4-star, and I would pick up from this author again. And if you would like to join my book club in May, we are going to be reading The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams. Then I read The Wedding People by Alison Espach. This is a general fiction about a woman who has had everything go wrong in her life, and she is in such a deep state of depression that she has decided that she is going to take herself to a hotel that she has dreamed of going to and take her own life there. However, it turns out that every other room in this hotel is booked out for a wedding, and she ends up running into the bride and just frankly telling her, because she doesn't care anymore because she's going to die, that she is planning on taking her own life. And the bride is like, whoa, dude, can you not do that, please? It is my wedding week. Through the two of them interacting, our main character ends up staying around a little bit longer. I really related to the way that this talked about depression, mostly how depression sort of filters your brain so that you can only think in a certain way. And it's not until you are able to talk to other people about the bad thoughts that you're having that you're able to turn it into something different. I really liked the frank conversations these people had with each other, because they're strangers. They just decide that they can tell each other anything that they haven't been able to tell anybody else in their life. A lot of the people here feel like they don't have community, or they have like a fake community, that they don't feel like they can actually rely on other people, that they're just doing things for show. And you don't want to burden other people with yourself. And these people are finding their way to each other. I think the ending of this ended up being pretty predictable, but the way that I was feeling throughout so much of this book, and the way that I could not put this down, means that I am planning on giving this book a 5-star. We'll see if it stays that way. Then, for a long time, I was reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. This is a modern classic that is about a man who is trying to avoid a prison sentence. So he decides to say that he's insane so he can go to the cushy psych ward instead. And our main character has convinced everyone that he is deaf and dumb. So he is observing this person, McMurphy. So McMurphy is trying to shake things up. He's trying to make this place his own. He's trying to break all the rules. But also the way that the patients are treated are not great. And a lot of those rules should not be there. And it is seeing how McMurphy gets broken down. I was worried that this was going to be too dude bro-y for me, and it was a bit dude bro-y. There's like 4 women in this book. One of them is never named. One of them, we don't see her boobs, and the other 2, we see their boobs. And I'm like, this is a little bit much. This was written in the 60s about things that were actually happening at the time and how people in psych wards were being treated, and I think that's really important for people to have known at the time, and for us to continue to know how people who have had mental illnesses have been treated throughout all of history. And if we do not continue to work on giving better treatments to people, that we could backslide into this. The one thing that really compelled me is that our main character is a bit of an unreliable narrator, because he does suffer from hallucinations. Sometimes we get to see glimpses into his past or his own personal experience through these hallucinations, and I thought that was really fascinating. But like the rest of this book, I'm okay, I'm fine. You know, it's not the worst thing I've ever read, but I just wasn't attached to it. Yeah, so I'm gonna be giving this a 3-star. Then I listened to Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the 3rd book in the Book of the Ancestor series, starting with Red Sister, which I read with my book club a long time ago. And the first book is about our main character, Nona Gray, who was a child when she was set to be executed, and she was saved by this woman who is at this convent of nuns that work in magic and being assassins. She ends up bringing Nona in, and it also is set on this planet that is slowly dying because the sun is not providing enough light anymore. All of these different peoples are sort of converging on the equator of this planet, as it's the only place that is still inhabitable. So it had been a long time since I had read the previous book in the series that I already wasn't that keen on, so it was kind of like, do I continue on and finish the series or not? And I decided to try it, and honestly, I just felt so neutral about this book. When I was listening to the audiobook, it was so easy for me to zone out, but I also don't think the plot of this book really would have engaged me if I had just binged the series. This book in particular is split between 2 timelines 3 years apart, as we're following directly after after the events of book 2, and then also flashing forward to a future where there is going to be this big battle war thing happening. This book, I think, is already shorter than the other 2 books, but then it's trying to pull off 2 timelines, and I didn't feel like either of the timelines was really giving me a lot. I preferred the past timeline, as our main characters are kind of trying to survive in the wilderness, but I just wasn't super attached. There were a couple of scenes where nuns are outwitting people, which I think were really fun. We ended up getting some answers about the world that I thought was cool. I think it was interesting to see some more of the sci-fi type aspects come in, but honestly, I would have loved more. I gave the first book 4 stars and then the second one 3. If I give this book a rating, because maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should just abstain, I think I'm going to be giving it a 3 because I just was not attached to it. Then I read Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is my repeat author for the year. This is the 2nd book in the 2nd era of Mistborn, so overall the 5th book in the Mistborn series. And this era is about Wax and Wayne in this industrial early 1900s sort of setting. They are 2 people who have come from this area that feels like the Wild West. They have been called back to the city, and they are having to deal with the politics of that. In this book, there is some sort of killer who is on the loose, and they are trying to figure out who it is. I had so much fun with book 1. So there's a total of 4 books, but it kind of is like a prequel and then a trilogy in the way that they're structured, and this sort of kicks off the plot for those 3 books, and I'm told that this is supposed to be the weakest, and I can see why. I was engaged with it. I wasn't obsessed with our characters in this one. I thought it was fast-paced, and I thought for the most part I was liking following them as they're going around on their investigation, but I wasn't that invested in solving the mystery. I had a very strong conviction of who I thought the bad person was, and I ended up being entirely wrong. I told myself I was going to be so surprised if I was wrong, and then the person who it was revealed themselves, and I was like, oh, that's not surprising at all. Like, that felt like an obvious answer that I thought was like a red herring. And there were some things that I thought were very emotional but predictable. I am really liking the fantasy parts of this world and seeing how the Mistborn magic has evolved over the course of whatever, but I don't think that the plot of this specific book is going to stand out for me, especially in the litany of books that Brandon Sanderson has written. So I'm going to be giving it a 4. Then I read As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfik 2. This is a YA, general fiction or historical fiction, depending on your definition, about our main character Salama, who is a teenager who had just started college trying to be a psychiatrist when the Syrian Revolution broke out. And she has been sent back home and is now a surgeon for the local hospital because so many of the doctors have died and there are so many injured that there is absolutely no resources to go around. And she is so haunted. Most of her family has been killed, and she loves her country deeply. She wants to stay here, but the enemy is closing in, and so she is going to have to make a decision if she wants to stay or go. She is experiencing hallucinations in the form of a man who is sort of encapsulating her PTSD, and she is also running into a boy who is also trying to help the revolution in some ways and falling in love with him. This book is absolutely harrowing. It says on the synopsis that it is perfect for fans of The Book Thief and Salt to the Sea. Haven't read Salt to the Sea, but like, I see the Book Thief comparison, except this book is more gory, shows more of violence and injury and death, and we see so many terrible things happen to innocent civilians, a good amount of them children. It's so deeply upsetting to see. I was shocked at this amount of stuff being in a YA book. Not because I don't think that content can't be in a YA book, because I think it is important for people to know what sort of stuff is going on in the world, and because like it is a reality that teenagers are having to step up and do this work. It was just not what I expected. I just wasn't anticipating it. The messages here are going to help a lot of people see what it is like to live in this situation where you deeply love your country, but it is not safe for you. Like, so many people are like, oh, why wouldn't you leave? Why wouldn't you leave? And you see here how desperately she wants to stay. I just think that this has so many ties to things that are happening right now in Gaza, even though this is about a different war. And in fact, I had no idea about the Syrian civil war / revolution other than it happened. And I found out that this started in 2011 and it didn't end until a couple of months ago. I was was 10 when the Syrian Revolution started. It made me want to become more aware about the actual real life history that has happened. There were some things in the like interpersonal character plot that I wasn't as much of a fan of. There are definitely some YA-isms that made me not love this book as much. And also there was a plot device that was used towards the end of the book that I have recently been really hating in books. And even though like I understand why it was used in the book, it actually kind of fits the book really well. That doesn't mean that I liked the device and kind of wished it wasn't there for my personal taste. But I am going to be giving this a strong 4.25. It could even go up. But I will 100% be recommending this to a ton of people. Then I listened to Promise Me Sunshine by Kara Bastone. This is her 2025 release, and this is about our main character, Lenny, whose best friend recently passed away, and she's absolutely devastated by it. They were each other's whole world, and she has absolutely collapsed. When she takes a new nannying job, the uncle of the child that she is nannying at first sees her acting erratically and is like, this girl isn't okay. She should not be the nanny. And then he finds out that she's actually grieving and that's why this is happening. He stops everything and is like, hey, I'm gonna help you. I've been through this. Ready or Not by Kara Bastone was my favorite romance book of last year and one of my favorite books of the year. I had been so highly anticipating this. I had seen 5 stars for it everywhere, and I did end up really loving this book. I think the first section of this book was a very strong 4-star, and the further this book went, the better it got. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is the same narrator as Ready or Not, and she does a fantastic job. I think the thing that makes Ready or Not still my favorite Kara Bastone is that the humor hit me a little bit more than in Promise Me Sunshine. Like sometimes the comedy didn't 100% land for me when it was in this book. I think that might have been one of the things that made me be like, oh, it's not a 5, but I loved this book so much. There were so many moments, especially in the second half, that I ended up tearing up here or there. Just loved getting to see Lenny slowly over the course of this book find herself again. I love the relationship between these two, but I love Lenny so much, and I love her being able to find happiness again. It's just beautiful. I love Kara Bastone so much. I believe that she is going to be a favorite author of all time at some point because she just makes her books feel so real life, and I love the complicated arcs that our main characters go through and how the romance supplements the journey of the main character so well. I really like the love interest. He had to grow on me a little bit. The two of them end up being so sweet together, and they both help each other grow so much that I really cannot recommend this book enough. So right now, because the beginning felt like a 4 and the rest of it felt like a 5, I'm giving it a 4.75. It could very easily get bumped up. It's just making me consider all of the 4.75s that I've given out this year if I gave this a 5-star, so I might have to reevaluate some ratings if I give this a 5. And the last book that I read this month was What Happens in Amsterdam by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is her 2025 release. This book will have just released by the time this video is posted, so you can go get your copy now. I ended up getting a copy on NetGalley from the publisher Berkeley, so thank you so much to them for sending this to me. This is about our main character Danica, who had an explosive breakup of her office relationship, so she ends up taking another job on a whim in Amsterdam. She was a preemie baby when she was little, so her parents are very like hovering and everything and thinking she can't do things. So when she gets to Amsterdam and everything, and I mean everything, starts going wrong, she is absolutely determined to make this move work for her. And then she ends up running into her first love, who was her family's foreign exchange student. They end up getting into a green card marriage so that she can stay in Amsterdam. I didn't know going into this book that it was a green card marriage. I knew that it was a marriage of convenience, and I think the fact that it is an illegal marriage stressed me out a lot. I think that we could have done the plot of this book avoiding that plot point, or even just fake dating. I think fake dating would have been fine. I was so engaged in this book. I couldn't put it down. That does not mean it was like the highest quality thing I've ever read. The more that I think about the book, the more that I'm like, oh, like this could have been done differently. I think that this could have been expanded upon. How I was talking about Promise Me Sunshine is that I really love the journey of the main character, and in this book they are more focused on the romance plot line than proportionately I tend to like. I think that her main characters could be a little bit more fleshed out, but I absolutely bought the chemistry between our two characters, and I was just invested in everything going right. A lot of the spicy scenes I was enjoying. This felt to me like a silly romance movie that you would go watch on the Hallmark Channel or something like that. It felt like a popcorn romance, you know, I got through it really quickly and I had a good time. It didn't have like an extra layer to it that would have made this a 5-star for me. I have a major complaint I would like to file with the people who designed this cover, which I think is such a beautiful cover. But what it completely ignores is that our main character actually has a port wine stain on her face. And I have never before read a book with a character who has a port wine stain on their face. It's supposed to be on the right-hand side of her face, and the left side of her face is showing in the cover, and they just decided to not put it on there. As a person who does not have one, I think that it is absolutely a shame that they did not want to show a person who has a port wine stain on their face. That's just my take. I'm really having to evaluate how I'm gonna rate this book, because I could rate this book anywhere from a 3.5 to a 4.25, especially because like I read Funny Story earlier this year, and I gave that a 3.75, even though I think there is absolutely no things wrong with that book. I just wasn't that invested. I think I'm going to be settling on a 3.75 for this book right now, but honestly, that could swing in either direction. So those are all the books that I read in April. Let me know what you end up picking up. Is there anything you would recommend me? And if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought. If you would like to follow me anywhere, you can find me at the links in the description. And if you would like to keep watching my video, you can subscribe down below. I would love to have you around. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.